Hi, friend. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I was just thinking, you use Twitter the way I kind of wish I could use it these days, or like I wish the way it would work because you follow no one, but I assume you use lists to. So I was gonna say usually I'd be like, oh, we've been mutuals for
Right?
4 or 5 years at this point, and it's like, well, we effectively are mutuals. You just don't follow me, and I follow you, but
Yeah.
but in spirit, we are mutuals of the spirit.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's kind of silly that Twitter shows you who you follow and how many people follow you, and like it's very numbers oriented, and it's just like I don't know. Do you read their tweets? Do you like their tweets? Do you reply to
Mm.
them? Do you interact? Do you have calls? Like that's what mutuality is about. It's
Yeah.
not about a number,
Yeah.
anyway, for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But um,
Do you know Frank Ocean?
yeah,
On one of the albums, there's a little skit of the French guy like telling the story of some girl he tried dating, and then she was like, "Why don't you follow me on Facebook?" And he's like, "I don't want to go on Facebook." And then she just like dumped him.
she's like, we're not compatible if you don't want to
Yeah.
be on
He's like,
Facebook.
"What is going on with this people?"
I
But
guess
yeah.
she knew sooner than he did. So, um, well, yeah, I think we've
Yes.
been in the same neighborhood of Twitter for 5, 6 years now, and I remember some
Yeah.
interactions we had around that time, and have stayed in touch. And
Yeah.
um, I've always appreciated your presence and interacting with you, and it feels like a good time to go deeper into some shared interests that we have. Um,
Hmm.
as you know, I like to start with the hardest question, and it only gets easier
Yeah.
after that,
Yeah.
which is about your life story. And there's really no pressure here, but for
Yeah.
me, I just love people and I love their stories. And as much as I am interested in specific things that I'm going to ask you about St. John's or money or Gendlin or whatever, um, I want to know about who you are, and I want those interests to be framed in the story of your life and how
Mm.
you became interested in those things and what the background and context is for you. So I'd love to hear anything that you'd like to share about your life and where you've been, how you've grown, how you see
Yeah.
yourself. I would love to hear it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've listened to a number of episodes over the last week or so, and it's interesting seeing how different people do it. But I started with your episodes, so I really liked how you told your story with Rich. It sounded like you didn't even know you were going to do that, but you just told it in third person from like birth year by year to the present. I was like, wow, like that's cool to third person yourself like that, and so just like look at yourself that way. So anyway, I think maybe I'll do something like that. Um, yeah, I wanna start like before me with my parents. Um, so yeah, my dad is yeah he comes from a very big Catholic family. Um, he then he didn't continue on with the religion. But in his own way, he has a very deep kind of spirituality. And so he was born and raised in California, and he's like a complete backpacker, mountain guy. And I mean, like right now, he's literally in the Himalayas backpacking. Uh, and yeah, I often heard growing up that he would say like nature is my church, and even more specifically, I heard a couple times like Yosemite Valley is quite kind of like his cathedral. Um, and he's a professor. He is a professor of like geography and geopolitics is not quite right the word, but he teaches a lot about how geography and culture shape each other and how place impacts people. And then on my mom's side, she is the daughter of two generations of Salvation Army ministers, Okinawan Salvation Army ministers. So she too is not part of the church. Like she's extremely subtle about her spirituality, but it's there. I often forget. Um, and she's a midwife. So yeah, I wanted to like paint those pictures because they really are in me. Um, and then together they traveled and lived in Asia for about 10 years up until when I was born. So they lived in Japan for a really long time, traveled all throughout Southeast Asia, backpacked in the Himalayas. Um, and then they went back to Honolulu, where my mom is from originally. And they were both in grad school, and then they had me. Uh, yeah. So I was very much a love child, very much wanted. And yeah, so like in Japan, kind of the main friend group that my parents had was this like network of midwives. Like the most hippie Japanese people you could imagine, like people that don't usually like exist in the popular conception of Japan. Like like Bob Marley if he was Japanese. Uh, and yes, when I was born in Honolulu, I was born at home, and multiple of those midwife friends flew out to be there. And my dad literally caught me in the room, which later on became my bedroom uh, during middle school and high school. Um, yes, I feel like I had a very like sensuous, not in like a sexual way, but like in a rich, juicy kind of way, childhood. Um, from birth, like literally caught, like none of the crazy hospital stuff. And my mom, being a midwife, she really believed in natural birth, so she did it all. No, you know, no meds. That's really, I think, an important strain for me. Um, yeah, and then I grew up basically like in the ocean, on the beach, and in the mountains in Hawaii. When I was 4, we moved back to Japan for about a year, and I went to school there. It's like right at the beginning of my memories. Um, and then we came back, and I had I had a new younger brother when we returned from Japan, and mm, I ended up going to the local Waldorf school for kindergarten up till 5th grade. I don't know if you know Waldorf very well, but it's like Montessori and Waldorf are kind of often like together as alternative schools. Montessori is very much like practical, like let the kids do real things in the world, and Waldorf is very much like let's just allow the child to be like the divine spirit that it is and like not impose a developmental process onto them. And so it's very much about the arts. We like created our own textbooks. Like we hand wrote and illustrated our own textbooks. We sang all the time, played many different instruments. Um, I was always like a deeply like physical person. So we had like an inter-island pentathlon, uh, and it was like not that many people. So I was like a sort of a big fish in a small pond there, and I like won like the majority of the gold medals as like a 10-year-old pentathlon. Um, but yeah, I just remember it being like we didn't have a lot of money, and that was a private school, so like my parents really chose to invest in education. Oh, something I thought was funny is like the first book that my dad says he read to me was Plato's Republic. And I have a picture that I really love of me as a baby holding Iron John by Robert Bly. So like that's like from the get-go what was around me. And like my mom read to me like every night for like 10 years, probably. So books from the very beginning were deeply part of my world, and as was like being very physical. Um, so yeah, then in sixth grade, I switched to one of the bigger private schools on the island. Uh, for a number of reasons, I remember a lot of it, but one reason was that they had bigger libraries than the school I was already at. And I was like, I want that. So I like self-studied my way. Like I had to take standardized tests for the first time. That was not something like Waldorf ever did. Waldorf didn't even like push you to learn to read. It was like you'll figure that out when you're ready. So then I switched to this prep school, and it was like completely different world. Suddenly there were grades, suddenly there were standardized tests, suddenly, I mean, completely different social world in many ways. Um, the like what people were there for was different. Education as like a value wasn't really there in the same way. Um, I actually stopped reading and stopped doing art for a while after I transitioned there. Um, yeah, and that's where something that I tell people a lot in the money mapping sessions when I just share my background is like that switch was really pivotal. It sort of defines, I think, the sort of duality that I've experienced for the rest of my life. I don't think it was new then, but it really like solidified it in a way where like I had already felt like a hippie among hippies at Waldorf, and then I switched to this private school, and I was like, I am so like such an oddball here, and I don't understand how this universe works. I don't understand the values that are at play. Um, and there was a lot of people with a lot more money around as well. And so I kind of got a chip on my shoulder then where I felt like suddenly, in contrast to them, I was like, wow, they have like so much resources. They have things that I want. And like the parents are doing these careers that gave me this sense that they knew how to operate in the world in a way that I didn't consider my parents to know how to do. Like in a very like material, operational, economic sense. Um, and I remember my dad used to tell me, he was like, "We are rich," about our family. And I didn't understand what he meant at all. Like I thought, not only did I not understand, but I also kind of like lost some trust in him because I was like, that's not true according to what it means to me right now at like 11, 12, 13 years old among all these people. And yeah, that chip on my shoulder kind of developed over the years into this desire to like I had felt like I didn't understand how how reality worked somehow and that they did. So that became something that I always wanted to figure out. Um yeah, so I was there throughout high school, continued to play lots and lots of sports. I spent a year of high school in New Mexico, where I went to like this little charter school that was revolved really around like outdoors education. So it was a lot of backpacking, but then there was a lot of also Socratic seminars, which is where I was introduced to that for the first time, and I really loved it. Like we would go on backpacking trips and then like do Socratic seminar around the fire. Like it was amazing. Uh, so with that, I had this experience of that, a Socratic seminar in New Mexico. So that kind of tease up came later. Um, Went back to high school on Oahu for my junior year, and I started thinking about college. And I kind of was thinking between several things. There was like maybe three colleges that really stood out to me. Like one was Warren Wilson in North Carolina, which is like an agricultural, or at least there's a program there, which is what I was interested in. It's like a agricultural based program. And then I was also thinking Reed, uh, because I at that point already felt very much like intellectually oriented in my interests. And then St. John's appeared. I had really good relationships with the two deans of my class, and like they saw in me that like I really wanted to learn, like I was actually there to learn, and they told me that, and they like told my parents that they're like, this is different. Uh, and at some point, one of them mentioned it to me, and like they had a poster on the wall, of the stack of all the great books. I was like, oh, what's that? Uh, there was also a recent graduate of St. John's, like uh, doing like a teaching gig with my English teacher that year. So I got to like interact with him, and he like showed me like Euclid stuff, and I was like, oh, that's why. Um, and yeah, a recruiter came out from St. John's, and we went to the beach and just sat on the sand and like chatted about where I was at and what St. John's was about. And she's like, yeah, well, it sounds like this is the place for you. And I was again in junior year. Um, and I was before realizing St. John's really like stood out to me as a place to go. I was considering just leaving and kind of doing what you did, the pilgrimage. Like not obviously not explicitly conceived of that way, but I had I had somehow gotten my hands on a book at the that year called The Teenage Liberation Handbook, which is about unschooling. And I was like, yeah, wow, that's it. I really like that. And I was also reading like a lot of John Dewey that year. I had gotten like really into educational philosophy and like was wondering just like what's education for? I was reading John Taylor Gatto about like where the public education system even came from and why it is what it is. So I was like, I want to learn, and staying another year in high school like seems like a waste of time. I could find some classes that I might like, but it's not like I could just go to St. John's now. Uh, so yeah, that's what I ended up deciding to do. I was like, well, as you said, yeah, yours, they don't require a whole lot of you. Uh, People drop out after arriving, but like they open their arms to people. Uh, so yeah, I put together my application, and yeah, I guess in that spring of my junior year, I like applied and got accepted. And another thing about St. John's was like I mentioned I was thinking about Reed, and when I heard about St. John's, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's way better to me sounding than Reed, because Reed I could see in my own tendency as like an introverted person was like it just seemed to facilitate an environment where you could just go so deep into a rabbit hole and sort of like be kind of isolated in that way, I imagined. Um, and with St. John's, being that everyone is doing the exact same thing and so has shared experience, shared readings, etc., shared conversations, like it was an environment that like completely facilitated connecting with everyone. And that really appealed to me. It was like, oh yeah, that kind of protects me from a tendency that I have to just go burrow. Um, so yeah, then I went to St. John's and Santa Fe, obviously, never was a question for me. Um, and St. John's was beautiful. I know you have a question about St. John's, so I don't know if I should just r rush through it, but yes, I mean Santa Fe itself, just absolutely gorgeous. You know, the it sounds like you've been there, so like the campus is tucked up in the foothills of the bottom of the Rocky Mountains, and several years in a row, my dorm was sort of like the furthest up in the back corner of campus, and so I was able to literally like climb out my window and go hike a mountain, and I would do that like every morning, and then come knock on my friend's window and go to breakfast. Um, yeah, and I had a couple of internships that were pretty important during that time. I interned one of the earlier summers at a sales or at a solar installation company in Honolulu, and I was like interning on the sales team, and I had no commercial experience. I had no business experience. I was such an idealist. And they put me on the phone and they had me do cold calls. And because it was an environmental thing, and my dad's a massive environmental guy, like ran the sustainability program at the school he worked at. Uh, I was like, yeah, like solar panels are for the earth. Like, and I would call people. That was not it. That's not how it worked for people. Uh, so that was quite a shocking but educational experience. I also had the opportunity that summer to like rewrite the sales script, and it probably ended up being of no use, but like I had an interesting time doing that where I was trying to sort of like uh sort of invite the sales guys to like think more deeply about what they were doing. Uh, yeah, so that was one internship, and then I had two other internships as a butcher because I had gotten very, I mentioned like being interested in agriculture. Going into St. John's, I got really interested in my health and like eating better and differently. I was like into paleo then, and also loved cooking. That kind of went hand in hand with my discovery of cooking. And so I was like, yeah, I want to go explore like whole animal butchery, like small scale sustainable farming. So I did that a couple times in Colorado, and then I spent the summer doing it in San Francisco. That was very fun, but I realized that the ceiling was very low. It was a very challenging life. And there was one guy there who had been an accountant for a number of years and had made enough money that he felt comfortable. And he really hated being an accountant. And so he then walked away and got into the butchering and he was loving it. But then there were these other people I worked with who had gone to cooking school like straight out of high school or something. And now they were doing this work which doesn't pay a lot and is long hours, and they're in San Francisco, so it's expensive, super expensive too. And I realized like as much as I loved that, I loved the hands-on involvement in the food world and whatnot. Like I wanted to be able to do work that had sort of disproportionate like effort to outcome kind of thing. I wanted to be able to step away from it and like reevaluate what I was doing. And I didn't see that those people I was working with had the option largely. Um, yeah, also at St. John's, the it was really a period of like figuring out sort of what were the some of the big questions and themes that were really have like persisted to this day, really defining. Um, I wrote about the Nicomachean ethics like 3 or 4 times. I was interested in the idea of acrasia, of like inner conflict, of like telling yourself or knowing that you should do one thing and then in practice not. And then the really big one was in junior year in my first preceptorial. I I don't remember how like I became interested in this, but there was one on offer about the phenomenology of perception by Merleau-Ponty, and I did that, and that has been so huge from a massive through line from that. And because he was writing like in the early 1900s, not super early, and he was really the first person that I'd ever encountered in the program, and even to this day, kind of like the first philosopher that I know of to really take seriously the idea that we are embodied and that our existence comes from that, rather than just treating body as like object or not even considering it. So that was like a big light bulb for me. Um, so yeah, St. John's was like a beautiful experience. I love it so much. It was a constant sort of back and forth of being like, I'm sick of like being so in my head all the time, and then like wanting to go and do something very much like grounded and physical in the world, and then realizing that like I also had the other part of me and wanting to go back. And then yeah, in my senior year, I did my preceptorial on Nicomachean ethics again, and I wrote my thesis. I don't know. People probably don't know. So like we didn't write like thesis arguments. That's not how that was for us writing. It was like question driven papers. So the question really for me in the Nicomachean ethics um, was what does it mean to be yourself? And what's the relationship between happiness and being yourself? Again, massive through line to this day. Um, So yeah, from there, I graduated. I had student debt, probably like $35,000 or something. My parents also were holding some of it. And so I came out and I realized like as much as I loved all that, it didn't at all set me up for anything. Mary said something similar about her program. And it was like a blessing and a curse because like I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, and I have student loan like grace period is 6 months. Like, I better figure it out. Uh, so that chip on my shoulder from before came back, and I was like, okay, I experimented with learning programming briefly, and I was just like, that does not sit with like how my brain works. I've always liked writing. Let me go pursue that. And so I progressively like narrowed it down to copywriting, direct response copywriting, which is a very specific thing. I don't know if you're familiar. And then not only direct response copywriting, but direct response copywriting in the like financial publishing industry, where the main product is like newsletters that have investment advice, different investment strategies, and it's sold direct to consumer online for the most part. Like if you go to Business Insider and under the article, there's those little spammy looking ads, and then the next, if you click on it, you get like a what looks like an article. It's advertorial, and then that often goes to like an hour-long sales video, and then a long checkout page and whole funnel there. And so that was the industry that I went to, and I became a copywriter, and I was doing that. Um, Part of learning that was like I had just come out of St. John's where I was like reading Aristotle all the time, and my writing conveyed that like it was very clunky. And so I had to retrain that. So a classic piece of advice in that industry of copywriting is to handwrite sales letters and pieces of copy that have been successful in the past to really like ingrain them. So I spent so much time doing that with sales copy as well, but also like just writers whose voice I liked a lot. So like C.S. Lewis was one because it was like really clear and simple. Um, but yeah, so I did a ton of that, and then I got my first job in that industry, and it was pretty small financial publishing company, but it was so it felt for me like very meaningless in that like it was just like, oh, which stocks are gonna go up? Or like, what are the hottest tech stocks of 2015? And that was the year. And I was like, I don't care. Like, uh, and so I stayed there for only like 5 months. And then there was another big publishing company called Agora based out of Baltimore. And the man who started it back in the 90s, he's kind of a philosopher in his own right. And it was common of him to recruit people out of St. John's in Annapolis usually. And so I started reading like his newsletter, and he wrote daily about just macroeconomics and philosophy and questions of that kind of thing. And I read his books. Um, and I was like, I want to work with him. At the time, they were starting a new publishing imprint, which was about like classics and like wisdom from the classics. So I had a freelance project, and I wrote a sales letter for that. Um, but yeah, so I switched over and then joined this new company, and I started working basically directly under him. And it was like a dream come true, and I got flown to like be in his private office with him and like work on stuff together and just listen to how he thought about marketing. Um, but then, yeah, I was like super new to all of that stuff, finance, investing, etc. I had really had a lot of biases against it. Like my family was not at all commercially oriented, and in many ways, there's a lot of antagonism towards that. So I found myself in that world, not just within the world of money and business, but in the role of copywriter, effectively as salesperson, like the person who has to go make it all happen, connect the customer to the business. And that was like really fun and exciting, but like really tormenting for me. And I was trying to also figure out like, is this stuff legit? Like, I don't know. So I was like trying to learn how to do the job, but also like trying to like understand the stuff that we're selling to the point where I could feel comfortable, but it was really challenging to do. I spent a lot of time like hunting around for philosophies that would help me like bring together what I felt was a lot of inner conflict about how I felt about money and marketing and stuff. Um, and I had started free writing every morning after I left college. Sometimes I'd do it for a couple hours. I just had to like emotionally vomit like before I could even like go to work and bring myself to do any of it. And I was really hard on myself through that time. I like reread a lot of those and I was quite like self-flagellating. Um, yeah. So then a couple of years into that, I read Thinking Fast and Slow, and that was like a pretty life-changing book. Uh, our customer base at Agora was, for the most part, uh, white men of retirement age, largely conservative or libertarian, um, and so we had to appeal to that. And as a copywriter, my job really was to like get into and live inside the minds of our people so that we could speak to them. Because of copywriting, it's like start with the conversation that's already happening in their mind. So I was like reading the news that they're reading and thinking about the problems they're dealing with and like the things that scare them because that like the marketing that we were doing at that time was largely fear driven. But then I read Kahneman, and there was like one study in particular that it had a huge impact where they had a bunch of people like solving a word puzzle in one room, and then they had the people walk down the hall to another room to like solve another game. But the point was to see what happened in the walk between rooms. So in the first puzzle game, all of the it was like Scrabble or something. All of the letters were from words that had to do with old age and like unbeknownst to them. So they did that and then they walked down the hall. And like in the walking down the hall, the guys running the experiment saw that like these people now were like walking slower and it was materially present in them. So I was like, oh shit. Okay, if that's like from a freaking Scrabble game where they didn't even know, like what does that mean for me if I'm doing this all day every day? I don't want to, that's not what I want. So I was like, well, I want to, insofar as that's my job, I want to do it with people who inspire me, who I relate to, who whose head I want to be in, who I want to immerse myself in that way. And so that was really the impetus to go work with Ramit. Um, so yeah, I bought one of Ramit's programs and then I kind of used it on them, and I got a job with them, and worked there for a year and a half or so. Um, that was really fun. Met one of my best friends to this day there. Met an incredible mentor. Obviously, like had a lot of interaction with Ramit. Like that was fun. We wrote a lot together. He's very, very insightful about marketing and relationships and psychology. Different than I am, but in very helpful, insightful ways. And an interesting aspect of being there though was I was part of the Cobby team that was writing as Ramit, because Ramit, at least it's different now. He's changed his company, but he was known for having like his copy was so engaging and so personal. Uh, emails, sales pages, etc. And he took a lot of pride in that, and people respected him for it. And so, as a copy team, our job was basically to like method act him. And that over time began to really be hard on me because I still like my sense of boundaries was not good. And so I was just sort of like trying to be this person, and put myself away. I think you have talked about Jim and Andy, and I watched that probably after that experience or maybe during it, and I was like, oh shit. But it was kind of like I was trying to do that, but I didn't have the resources. Like I wasn't an actor, so I wasn't like actually doing it like Jim was. Um, yeah, so it's sort of like by trying to embody him in so many respects, it also like began to really make clear to me like what in me was not that. And so I sort of began to sort of individuate from it. Um, and yeah, while I was working there, I hit the peak of my like introversion, and I was a writer and it was a remote team. And so it would be where we'd be on calls discussing things and I would not say anything. I couldn't like be part of the conversation, but then afterward I would go and write up all my thoughts and share it. And I kind of hated that. Like it was all I could do, but I kind of hated that. I was like, I'm not engaged here. Like, and I want to be engaged in the moment. Uh, my mentor at the time suggested I try Toastmasters. So I started exploring that. And I also got it in mind that I wanted to try doing improv. Um, because I was like, I kind of want to get into meditation, but I already spend so much time alone, quiet. Like, I don't need that. And I saw improv as basically meditative meditation, but active and social. And that really excited me. So I went and I did Toastmasters a little bit, but like the thing that I really liked in Toastmasters was the improvised little games that we did. So I was like, okay, let me just go do improv. So that was here in Chicago. And so then I spent a good year really starting to deep dive into that. Um, I read Impro, uh, I think, on the recommendation of Venkatesh Rao. Like, I was never deep into it, but I was like a ribbon farm guy, not a less wrong guy. Um, so I read Impro. I remember like being in a Starbucks reading it and like just having what I remember referring to as just like braingasm after braingasm. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Uh, so yeah, then I got into improv. Um, Yeah, spent about a year doing that. Improv, I realized was like not quite it because I didn't really care about the comedy. And I didn't care about being a performer. To me, it was about learning to really just be purely in the moment. And so I had so lucky. I had such an amazing first level improv teacher, probably like the most empathetic and emotionally expressive person I've ever known. We did this, we did the gibberish thing before we got on the call. And there was one day where she literally ran half of the whole class, so about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours in pure gibberish. Um, yeah, like we did like half the class and we went out for, water and bathroom and then we came back and she just walked in and she started speaking. Like I thought she was speaking Spanish at first. And I was like, wait, that's nothing. That's not anything. And then she just kept going for the whole time. And she taught us new games. And then we did all the games in gibberish. And in like a weird way, at the time, in a weird way, uh, like we understood each other like arguably better. Uh, so that was a wild one. And but yeah, that same improv teacher, she recommended me to try this acting uh, program that was nearby where I lived. And it was a Meisner-based acting program. Do you know? Yeah, I was again, yeah, so lucky to find that because I kind of my whole life have really like not liked performing. I just want like my freaking thesis was about being myself. Like I don't want to like put on a show. Um, yeah, so it just so happened that this approach to acting was kind of the opposite of what I understood acting to be. And the one sentence definition of acting for them is really powerful, and I still use it and think about it. And it's that acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. So you kind of learn that in phases, and it's like first living truthfully, and there's kind of a base type of exercise that you do to just learn to be completely in the moment with another person, with all of your attention on them, just trying to soak in what's happening with them moment by moment and allowing yourself to just respond naturally, like nothing contrived. So just learning to be absolutely real in the moment and attuned deeply. And then the other side of that is that the imagination, so living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. So using your imagination outside of like the stage time to imagine a world that you're living in, imagine circumstances that you're in as a character, and imagine those vividly and let that be in you. But then you just walk on stage and you've let that go and just let it shape how you are. Yeah. So there was a period of time in like the first half of 2018 where I was doing 12 hours of improv and acting per week for a couple months. And it really like felt like it really rewired my brain. Uh, Yeah, going from like feeling like one of the more introverted people at St. John's to in the context of acting class and an improv class, people thinking that like I was kind of the most outgoing. Um, really powerful, really transformative. And I learned to cry, but again, not in an artificial way, just that I would like be sitting on the sidelines watching other people do the exercises. And I'd see them like break into tears. I'm like, what? How that happened? But over time in the audience, I started opening up and crying. And I was like, oh, like insofar as I'm in the audience, the pressure's not on me, I'm able to just like experience what I'm experiencing. And yeah, the whole acting experience like really drove home to me how disembodied I had become in my adulthood. Um, and yeah, like through the reading I was doing at the time, through all those experiences, I was like, oh yeah, okay, the body is where it is. Uh, if I like I was in those acting classes and I could just feel how tightly bound I was. And I was also with all these people who were so empathetic and so able to see what's going on in somebody else that it was like terrifyingly exposing because I was like, I feel like I'm maybe hiding a lot. I don't necessarily want to be, but like I am tight and these people are just seeing right through me. But I was like, okay, yeah, I gotta get back into my body. Around that same time, again, because I wanted to like stop being so behind the keyboard, leaning into spontaneity. I kind of switched from writing to just speaking almost entirely. I bought a little voice recorder, and I had been doing free writing every morning, and I was like, well, I can just do that out loud. So I started just putting a timer on for like 20, 30 minutes every morning and just talking nonstop. And I would take my voice recorder out and talk and walk, and that was really powerful and continues to this day. So yeah, and then at the end of that year, I finally did get into meditation, but it was somatic meditation, and it just I discovered it was like, oh, this is perfect. Meditation never really made sense to me before or something. I don't know. My dad had done it his whole life, but like it never for me it never clicked until I discovered that, and I was just like, oh, okay. In the somatic meditation that I discovered was the first time I ever heard about focusing. I didn't look into it immediately, but it was it was like Vajrayana meets focusing in many ways. Um, and I read The Body Keeps a Score around that time, or I listened to it because I had I had listened to The Spell of the Censors, and I was like, ah, screw reading books ever again. I just want to hear. I don't want to deal with symbols. So I listened to Body Keeps a Score, and when I finished that, I got hit with well, like what I can only describe as like a sense of calling. I was like, I don't know what it's going to be, but this book brings together everything I've been up to. And I've been all these things that I've been up to, I wasn't doing them for the sake of them. Like I didn't do improv to be a comedic performer. I didn't do acting to be an actor. I didn't do etc. Like it was always like I was searching for really that like how do I be myself question. Um and yeah, so the body keep the score kind of like brought things together for me. I was like, oh wow. Like it just was such a physical like moment of realization. Um I started working with a therapist at the time who had was based on like a certain model of parts work, not IFS. It was a more simple model. Um, and then progressively from there, I discovered IFS in early 2018, 2019. Um, discovered Feldenkrais around the same time, got really into that. Um, I joined this program called Smart Body, Smart Mind, which is an incredible program by an incredible woman, Irene Lyon, who is, yeah, was a like highly trained somatic experiencing practitioner and a certified Feldenkrais practitioner and had done work in exercise science, working with seniors to like help them learn how to weightlift. And her program is all about, I guess I think of it sort of as like a much more slow and thorough version of what Johnny Miller does. I don't know. I've not gone through Johnny Miller. I don't want to say that in a way that puts that in a bad light, but I can only speak to my experience with Irene. But she goes deep, deep, uh, and it's all about the science of the nervous system, how it works on a physiological level, and also a ton of practice around regulating oneself. So I started doing that in early 2019, and it's kind of something I've gone back through almost every single year. Um, I got into dancing that same around that same time, trying to again be more in my body again. Um, I started doing yoga. I got introduced to ecstatic dance, so I started doing ecstatic dance a lot, which is very in line with things because it's like not a structured way of dancing. It's just sort of pure self-expression. I joined a dance troupe where I was living and performed actually with them a show. Um, yeah, and then from there, got into like men's work online during COVID. COVID, yeah, was when I got on Twitter really, and yeah, I was like on Twitter one to kind of like off gas a lot of my thoughts and feelings about marketing that I didn't feel comfortable sharing with the people I actually worked with, like all the frustrations and discomforts I had with it. Then also I wanted to find other people who were interested in like IFS and stuff. And so I found Visa through his 1000 word vomits. I found, I think I found Richard at that time. Um, Peter from the Stoa. And yeah, I got in there and I was like, oh wow, there's a bunch of other people here who are like really interested in those things. So I just spent more and more time there. And I was also like I was trying to find people who were like in the world of finance, but also were in the world of sustainability and like brought those values together. Because I was like, it must exist. I want it to exist so much. And Richard shared an article with me back then, which was life-changing, which introduced me to this guy named Peter Koenig, who does money work, teaches money work. I can talk about that later, but that became very influential for me. And I went really deep into his work and I joined a program that he and another woman started together, which was all about, it was like a 9 week program uh, about exploring your relationship to money in a really deep way. Uh, I ended up spending 2 years doing it. Uh, like all the prompts that were like, take 10 minutes and write some answer. I was like, I'm gonna go for a walk and like record myself talking about this for 2 hours. So I stretched that out for a couple of years. In 2022, I was like sort of on a I basically got let go from my job. My boss after 4 years was like, "You don't like this, and I know you're not going to leave." So he ended my contract. So then I ended up having like a roughly a year off and I moved home. And I got more involved in Teapot at that time. Um, and that's when I first Shift 30 came about. Because I had all in all like I had worked with coaches in the past, I had done the acting stuff, etc. Like in all of those experiences, I felt very clearly, I was like, what they're doing seems fucking sick. Like that sounds so fun and like satisfying to be in their role, helping people in the way that they're helping me. So this idea of like coaching or therapy or something like was in me for like yeah, since 2017, 2016 even. Um and yeah, so then in like mid 2022, uh yeah, I just had like I had been thinking a lot and talking to a lot of people and whatnot, but then like there was just one time where the idea, the name, and like entire structure of this program just came to me like all at once, and I was like, "Oh fuck!" It was so charged. I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And so I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna hit record on my thing and like try to get all my ideas out," and then I ended up spitballing like the full sort of sales pitch for it without meaning to, but I was like, oh, I guess this is happening. Uh, so then to your point about like not wanting to edit a lot and like very low effort, I was like, cool, that's basically it then. So I just posted the recording and like took the transcript and like very lightly edited it. And that became the whole thing. And then I ran it a month later, and the intervening time, I kind of just like made a lot of jokes for marketing, and I just had fun with it. And so it filled up. There was 30 people. And I ran that, and it was yeah, Shift 30, so Felt Shift is based around Eugene's work. So I knew it pretty well at the time already, but obviously now way, way more. Um, so yeah, I ran that, and I was running like one to two calls a day for about a month, uh, holding a group and doing shadow work with people one on one in the group. And then kind of like having office hours and just chatting with people and learning and teaching. Super fun. And I was like, I could very well like this is what I want to do, and this is like a realization of something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Um, but I was like, I don't want to rush this. Um, like I knew already that I wanted it to be about money. I wanted it to be about marketing, but like through this sort of shadow work, psychology kind of way. But I didn't want to rush it because I knew from all my time already in marketing, like different business situations and different time scales lead to very different ways of marketing and engaging with people. And I didn't want to put myself in a position where I was like, I need this to happen. And so I am this going to market and communicate to people in a way that's like really aggressive. Didn't want that. Uh, so I was sort of like, what if I let it take 10 years? Um, and there was a lot of serendipity happening at that time. And so I was like, maybe I'll look for another job. Like maybe I'll look for another job that sort of carries forward the marketing and finance stuff that I've been doing, but like in a more institutional context or like more like legit. Um, so I was like, oh, maybe I can go into like fintech. That's always been interesting. I just so I had a friend who was in fintech at the time. I looked up the company that he was at, and literally when I looked on their careers page was a copywriter role. And I like messaged him about it. We talked about it a couple of times, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm also the one hiring for this." Like, okay. So I went ahead with that, and uh, while I was applying, they were getting acquired by Goldman Sachs. So I joined, had about a month as part of the fintech company, and then transitioned into Goldman Sachs. And I spent 3 years, um, yeah, as a not a copywriter, but as a marketer within the retirement business of Goldman Sachs. Very interesting experience, also. Um, yeah, so that was about 4 years ago. Um, when I started that job, I moved back here to Chicago. I started working with a coach slash therapist at a depth that I hadn't done before. So um, I've now been working with this person for like 3 years straight. She's amazing. IFS. I spent about a year doing like voice coaching, but voice coaching that was really like somatic work using the voice. That was really cool. Um, I spent a year, almost a year, uh, basically doing speed dating as like a hobby. Uh, but it was a very unique speed dating approach, which was it was like almost like circling or something, where it's sort of like you're not left to your own devices. Like there's a structure to it, and you're invited to like really like be as authentic as you can be, and like there's literally like eye gazing or like repeating like mantras to each other or whatever. This is very like kind of wholesome in that way. Um, so I started going to those a lot, and then I made friends with the woman who ran it, and um, yeah, ended up like assisting her in them. So I was sort of facilitating as well. But yeah, I did that for about a year. But the whole point again was like I wasn't really looking for a relationship. I was really just I wanted an opportunity to like meet a lot of people and have a lot of opportunities to just be myself as thoroughly as I could be without trying to sort of shape myself to what expectations might be or what I thought would be likable. Um, and it was yeah, very fun. Like I had many nights where I just sort of talked to a bunch of people all night and like walked home just feeling like I was floating on air. I was just like, this is amazing. Like I don't care. Like I'm not trying to like get with anyone that I just talked to, but I just didn't hold back who I was at all, and it just felt like such a flow. So that was a big thing. Got back into ecstatic dance and five rhythms here, and then last summer I left Goldman and transitioned because I had arrived at a point where I was like, I know very clearly now what I want to do, and when I joined Goldman, it was very quick. It was very clear to me very quickly that like I didn't like the job, but I was like, I don't want to just I don't want to just eject. I want to face the sort of demons and stuff that come up in me when I'm in this world around these kind of people doing this kind of work, living this kind of lifestyle. So I kind of made a little pact with myself where I was like, I don't want to leave this job until I've sort of made peace with being here and where I can laugh about the ridiculousness of stuff, like in a very like Buddha-like way. I want to be able to get to that point. And in many ways, I did. Um, and then I was like, yeah, okay. I made peace with that. And I also realized that there's something I want to do way more, which is way more coming from me. So, yeah, 9 months ago, I left, and now I'm expanding this practice. We can get into. Yeah. Damn, that took a long time. Thank you for the
Yes.
opportunity to go through that.
How would you describe what you learned from your education at St. John's?
I think one big thing, which was maybe already true, but really got solidified, was I just don't see anything as separate. Just like breaking the fourth wall kind of thing. Like at St. John's, there's no, like all the tutors teach, all the professors teach everything. There's no departments. Um, right, and we read the original works of math, science, philosophy, history, language, etc. Uh, in chronological order, starting from Athens, really, Plato, Socrates times. And so, like in that experience, right, we're doing Euclid, and then we're reading Aristotle, and we're also reading Homer, and like all these different things, and you start to realize, like, yeah, these weren't like mathematicians and scientists and like guys doing their department thing. Like it was just like philosophy was just there was no physics yet. There was no defined things yet. And so these guys were just thinking about everything and they were all thinking about it at like roughly the same time and ideas in one place showed up in, ideas in philosophy showed up in geometry and math and etc. So that I think has been huge for me in that I just don't think in silos. Um, and I'm always sort of surprised in life when like I'll like talk to someone and they like there's like very hard walls between uh, areas of interest to them. Like I know you've done the or you've spent a lot of time with Tiago Forte's work, right? And like the whole knowledge management thing and like how Rome research came to be of like let's move from this strict categorical thing where we have to like figure out what box to put this idea in and like then it's not in any other box. And like let's open that up somehow so that it can just be the ideas and it can categorize itself however it needs. That I think that overall really gave me that as a foundation and then also um, appreciating like reading primary sources and then reading the history of things. I think a lot of times when I'm interested in things, I approach them historically and I want to learn like how they became what they are now and seeing the evolution of that and realizing like it's not about, at St. John's, we weren't trying to figure out like what is the current theory of any of these disciplines. It was like, how have humans attempted to understand this part of their existence over the thousands of years? And like now we have an understanding, but like we're going to keep living and we're going to keep evolving our understanding. So it contextualized any like particular idea within this sort of human journey of just trying to understand being in the world. Yeah. And then the emphasis on questions, better questions. Like that was a thing that was very prominent in their marketing materials that I saw in high school. It's like learning to ask better questions. I was like, yeah, okay, that deeply appeals to me. Um, so yeah, I'm very question oriented. I like prefer to be in question mode rather than like, here's the answer, give me the answer. I like to use questions to sort of send my attention in different ways or yeah.
What would you say the reservations were that you started to have about marketing from the different contexts that you were in? How would you summarize those?
Mm. Um, Maybe something that I put together more recently is like it's extremely objectifying. Like this is true of the particular marketing approaches that I was involved in, but also it's kind of true about marketing more broadly. You hear a lot of marketers who talk about their leads and their customers and their audience and stuff as basically just wallets that their job is to figure out how to open. Um, there's not a whole lot of seeing the person on the other end as a person and respecting them as such. Um, Ramit was way better about that, but like at Agora, for example, one of the terms for their approach was churn and burn.
Hmm.
So it was like huge promises, very aggressive sales pitches to get people onto an email list or like some newsletter. And then once they were on there, it was just like offer, 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 like further back end stuff. And like if they didn't like it, screw them, they burn off. So just churning through people. And there's a lot of gaslighting. I mean, yeah. I always found myself sort of while I was like compelled and excited by the idea that I could write something that would have this effect on a person such that they would like kind of go through this experience that I created and then they would like want to take some action. On the other hand, I always really found myself sort of siding with the customer because I never felt good about like how the customer was treated by the business. Um, yeah, I think that in broad strokes, that's a lot of it. It's like the just very objectifying, very agenda driven, very like obviously not everyone and not all teachers, but like it could become extremely gaslighty and just like it was always, I guess, a struggle for me and a question that always exists for people is sort of like where's the line of ethics there? It's very blurry because at the end of the day, like you're just writing something. Like you can't call it coercive in the sense that you're actually putting a gun to their head or, you have no physical contact with them. It's not coercive in that respect. And yet I found it to be very much so. Um, this like kind of pulling strings on people's emotions and psychology so that they will do what you want them to do. Um, Kind of shaming people about the idea of not doing the thing that you're trying to get them to do. Like something I saw so often was sort of at the end of a sales letter after the offer has been made, being like imagine when, 10 years from now, if you don't do this, like how fucking pathetic your life is gonna be,
Hmm.
you know, that kind of energy.
I imagine that you believe now that it's possible to do marketing in a way that's ethical and respects the customer and is aligned with the values that you want to live by.
I do. It's a question that I'm living all the time. I don't have like a full answer to it. There's many teachers and marketers who I found who are like close to that. Um, but I don't know. I feel like even when they have ways of approaching it that are very good, like I still want to, the question still exists in me and it still needs answering from me. So yeah, like lately I was like, I kind of want to at some point go back and kind of study direct response and cooperating from the beginning, but with all of the learning that I've had since then with the new sort of new questions, because I wouldn't be wanting to do it to just be a professional at that, but to see how are they doing what they're doing and how are they relating to people and how are they like, what can we learn about psychology and desire um, through that? And yeah, so I was like, I want to, this is a Gendlin term, but I want to like figure out how to cross this very well developed technology, communication technology, business technology of direct response marketing with this ethos of like treating the person on the other end as completely as a person as possible. And I don't like have a full answer to how that works. Like I, in many ways, have tried to structure what I'm doing now to be a system and an environment that allows me to operate in that way. But it's more like structural. It's not how I communicate in any one moment. It's like what kind of work I'm doing and whatnot. So yeah, yeah, that is a question that lives in me and very much wanting to continue answering it.
What are the clues that you've found about how to market in that way?
So yeah, like coming to marketing from this kind of question, I love the relational questions of marketing, the questions about pricing, the questions about self-expression, boundaries. I love. But as far as clues, I guess I'll point to a couple of teachers or marketers who I've liked a lot, uh, who get at this. Actually, one of the marketers who like sort of captured my heart the most was like one of the guys that existed during the Mad Men era, but he was not part of the Mad Men world. He was he ran an ad agency out of a fire station in San Francisco and had a very small team, and he was friends with like John Steinbeck and like philosophers and writers and stuff like this. And he actually introduced the world to Marshall McLuhan. Um, Medium is the message guy, and so this guy, his name is Howard Gossage, and I don't know, he took a way more playful approach to marketing. He kind of this was like in print days, far before Twitter and interactive media. But he was kind of doing what interactive media does, but using what they had at the time. So creating campaigns that were just like silly and it really involved the audience to participate and like have a conversation over time with the advertiser. Um, he took really seriously the idea that like there's all the people who buy from the ads, but then there's also all the people who have to see the ads and don't buy. And that they've had to have that experience. And that might be, like he hated billboards. He's like, I don't want a fucking billboard. Like taking the view of beautiful nature is so ugly. And that was a big contrast that he had with a lot of other big advertisers at the time who were just like, yeah, we're just gonna do whatever thing to just pound the sale home. Like, don't care if it's ugly, don't care if it's redundant, etc. Just make the sale. And he really didn't like that. He was very much an environmentalist. Um, he helped to found the Sierra Club and wrote ads where the coupon at the bottom of the ad was for people to write into their local government officials uh, in order to stop uh, damming the Grand Canyon or cutting down redwoods in California. So he had these advertisements, which were basically calling out the government for what they were doing, or considering doing it, and involving the people to speak up and tell their people not to do that, to make their voice heard. So he's a big inspiration. Um, Another guy, Andre Chaperon. One of the big things was just like as opposed to putting people through this extremely linear experience, like something that we did a lot was like we would put together sales videos, but like we wouldn't have a time thing at the bottom because we didn't want people to be able to know where they were in the sales message or move around. It was like, no, you have to go through the experience that I created for you, like very much like a factory. Um, Andre Chaperon, he's like, that is so controlling. Like, we don't need to do that. And so in all of his pages, he like prolifically links out to all sorts of things and sort of just allows people to find their own way. And he builds a world. Like you may have talked to Rob Hardy about this, but because I know Rob really likes Andreas too. But yeah, just like allowing the person to have whatever experience they're gonna have, like writing things that are compelling and invite people towards your offers, but don't like shove it down their throat and force them through it. Um, and then there's another woman who I really respect a lot, and Megan Macedo, and she had a quote that like hit me so hard when I first saw it in like 2019 or something. And she was like, think about your marketing, think about your business and your marketing and your relationship within your business and the relationship with customers, like as if it were a family system. And when you look at it that way, you realize how the majority of these social systems, businesses and their customers are so not good. Like such unhealthy relationships going on, so much sort of attachment stuff, if you want to use it that way, or just like, again, going back to the objectification thing. So she really took that seriously, and I took that and ran with it. And I was like, yeah, how do you think about the groups you're in and the relationships you have with your market or your audience as if it was a family? And like that then brings in, questions about attachment. It's like, am I in like this anxious attachment or whatever, like with my customers? And it's just starting to pare that back. I think it has less to do at the end of the day with what you how you do the marketing, and it's more an invitation to go back to yourself and do the work yourself. Because as a general principle, I'm very much of like the emergence school of thinking, where like you will do work inward inside, and what you then do will change, and it will probably occur spontaneously as well. So it doesn't give you any like concrete marketing ideas necessarily, but yeah, it's like I think of marketing very much as like an invitation. If you let it be an invitation to reflect on how what's your relationship to yourself and what's your relationship to the people that you're working with and trying to sell to, and what's your relationship to money too, because it like that kind of sits under marketing much of the time. So
Hmm.
yeah.
How did you get interested in Gendlin's work?
Yeah. Basically, Jen was like the glove fit the hand perfectly, basically. Um, I mentioned before we got on, right? I went and I was reading a lot of my papers from St. John's, and I'm just seeing in all the questions I was asking, like I was like, I just had a Gendlin shaped question in me, uh, even then. So right, I did Merleau-Ponty. Gendlin is like very specifically like building off of Merleau-Ponty. Um, yeah, there's like a lot of different pieces that like one of my favorite writing teachers, not one that I know, but the guy who I learned free writing from, Peter Elbow. I really love his whole approach to teaching writing, but I discovered in it he mentions Gendlin. Like before I even really like knew Gendlin, he mentioned Gendlin. So I was like, okay, like these people that I already really have gravitated to and who speak to me, Gendlin's already there in them as an influence. Um, and yeah, like a lot of these questions I was asking in college had to do with like the relationship between language and lived experience. Like one I read today was on Hegel and like pointing at things and like the difference between pointing at things and the difference between naming things, and how when you name it and you give it a name, the name is not the thing. So that movement between concept and abstraction on the one hand, and like sort of corporeal existence and lived experience moment by moment on the other hand. Um, and then like I did the somatic meditation, or discovered that at the end of 2018. It was talking about focusing. So I had these questions already driving me. I had seen in like a number of things that already like deeply resonated with me, that they referenced him as well. So I don't remember like because there was a period of time where I was like very in like IFS was the main thing. But at a certain point I kind of moved on from prioritizing IFS to focusing. And I don't remember exactly how that shift happened, but I mean it might have been something that like doesn't really get spoken about with Chen. The main book I know that people have read is just focusing. That's actually the most recent one I've read of his. But he says like I work as a philosopher. Like uh so the fact of him being a person professionally doing philosophy and like given the St. John's background and kind of just how I am oriented, that fact about him was like so compelling. Never mind all the other connections. And so that he was a philosopher in the way that he was and was doing stuff that was like side by side with IFS and that same kind of deep psychological work. I was like, this is the guy for me. Uh, so I mean, there's a lot of other sort of coincidental connections and things, but that's sort of like how it
What do
kind
you
of,
think motivated you to study his work so deeply?
um, yeah, from like as early as I can remember knowing about him, I had a very strong sense that I was like, I want to see the world like I want to be able to look at the world through his philosophy or his theory, his concepts. Like there was something that I could see already. I was like, I think if I really had that in me, it would really change how I saw sort of reality and relationships and being a person. Um, I felt that, yeah, already like in 2019. Um, so that was part of it. Um, I listened to the first half of your interview with Rival last night because I know like he's sort of like the other big Genlin guy. He did a very good job of explaining, but there's a lot of stuff he didn't say. Um, he told, he kind of talked about how focusing came to be with Genlin, but I think there's much more important to say, which is that I see Genlin as like I don't think in terms of modalities so much. Focusing is often talked about as like a modality among other modalities. I don't think that it is accurate at all. Um, I remember when I was running shift 30, uh, and we would like be doing focusing and sort of like shift into this sort of parts language, and people were like, "Oh, I guess we're going to do this other thing now." And I was like, "No, it's all one thing." Um, Genlin to me, so yeah, I gotta tell you a little more backstory of him, expanding on what Rival said. So he was at University of Chicago. He was more or less like a phenomenologist, and he was asking primarily his big question. He wrote this is his PhD thesis, experiencing and the creation of meaning. He was asking basically, yeah, what's the relationship between symbols and lived experience? How do they go back and forth? How do they impact each other? And Carl Rogers was working at UChicago at the time, and Gendlin, forget exactly why, if he like wanted therapy or he was just curious, he found himself in their offices, and they the like graduate students' papers were available to check out. So he started reading them, and he was like, "Oh, like this is literally what I am working on in philosophy." And they're doing it in practice. This is like a laboratory of the philosophical questions I'm asking. So he got himself involved and started working with Carl Rogers. And what he discovered once he got into the world of psychology, this was like in the late 40s, early 50s, was that psychology had no theory of change. There was a lot that existed about describing psychological states that people might be in, syndromes, Oedipus complex, etc., very Freud. But insofar as people are doing therapy, like the point is to help people change from where they are from where they are. And there was no theory of how that worked. And the concepts that did exist, a lot of the concepts from Freud, ego, repression, etc., like made change theoretically impossible in the way that they conceived of interiority. Because it's a very much like a an object approach, a content approach, where you're like, he kind of uses this language sometimes, like you're just a bag of meat with like psychological content in you. It's like things. And he's like, okay, well, insofar as there's no theory here, there's no way for us to make hypotheses about how to do this work better, no way to experiment and like really improve as a whole. So he started doing that work and building the theory and the new concepts that would allow for the field as a whole to improve and think better. Um, and Rival talked about the the stumbling thing. So Carl Rogers in his practice had already been recording like thousands of hours of therapy. And together him and Gendlin figured out they came up with something called the experiencing scale. And yeah, they just like went through so many thousands of hours and they saw that the cases that were correlated with success were those in which the people were like stumbling, like, well, say one thing and then be like, well, it's not that exactly, and then try to say it again. So they notice that and they're like, what's that? What is going on? And they realize what it was is that people were checking against themselves. People who were like really articulate and just telling stories, like they knew all that already. It didn't touch them. It was all abstract. It was all just words, but it didn't touch in their body, in the seat of their lived experience. But the people who were checking back, it was like, I feel sad. Actually, no, that's not right. Actually, I feel kind of like lonely or something. Um, so they were interacting with their body. They were having a dialogue with their body effectively, trying to represent what's going on in their lived experience with a symbol, and then checking back whether that symbol actually matched. And when it does match, that is when the living process moves forward. He talks about carrying forward, that our lived experience as bodies in the world know so much more than our minds do. Our bodies are situated in the world. And so a felt sense is sort of the feeling, if you will, of all of that. Your body, your body's knowledge of the situation that you're in. But also not just your body, like also everything you know and your whole history and whatnot, who you are. All of that together exists in you as an organism. And insofar as you have that sort of interoceptive capacity, you can feel that in you. And that, your body, with all of that as an organism, is trying to continue living. That life process trying to continue moving forward. And so in focusing, you try to be like, what is that? And giving words to it and symbolizing it carries it forward. So you're like, I'm this way. Am I? No, not quite. And then you're like, no, I'm this way. And then when you get it right, it's like, oh wow, that was accurate. And like inside of you shifts and you can feel that. And that's what a felt shift is. And it's a never-ending process. Obviously, you don't have to do it all the time, but like it's not about discovering like, here's how I am. It's just continuing to help the living process forward. So yeah, they discovered that that's what was happening with people in the successful cases. But then they also realized that people didn't know. They thought that therapy would teach them that skill. But they realized after a while that people that didn't know to begin with to do that or didn't already do that never learned it. So they had to figure out how to teach people to do that move. And that's what focusing was. But he's very explicit across many books and across many papers that it's not a thing in and of itself. It's sort of the essential sub process of any therapeutic work, any coaching, any change work. It's the essential sub process that allows you to check whether something's actually happening. So you can do CBT, you can do circling, you can do IFS, you can do whatever. And you can do all of those things in a way which is just up here and doesn't ever check back to whether it's like actually true in oneself as an organism. And then you're just spinning your wheels. But you can bring that to any approach and check. He's like, yeah, do some Jungian dream work, like do have an interpretation from a psychoanalyst, like whatever. But at the end of the day, it's for the person to recognize whether it's doing anything. And if it's not, try something else. So I see Gendlin as providing this like all-encompassing framework that holds all of psychological work within it. And like Peter Levine, who developed somatic experiencing, he in his speech, like accepting a lifetime achievement award for like somatic therapy, he's like, I think you guys should consider giving it to Gendlin. Like he gave us the language for all this. Like he allowed us to think about this stuff. Um, yeah, so I see Gendlin as sort of provide kind of showing the matrix within which all things like IFS and everything else, like they all exist within it. But he's providing how they can work together, what is like essentially what makes them work. And so I was like, well, I want to do this kind of work. I want to work with people in this capacity, like since years ago. And I was like, and I want to teach myself. Like I talked to many therapists about the process of studying for that and becoming accredited. And I was like, that sounds terrible. Does not seem like a recipe for success at all. So yeah, I was like, I want to teach myself. I know I'm autodidactic and Chenlin has always appealed to me, and I see his work as sort of providing a foundation. So yeah.
You know, you studied the great books at St. John's and found yourself reading Merleau-Ponty and Preceptorial, and uh, since graduating, you've done this kind of extensive, deep study of Gendlin. How do you see his work relating to that tradition?
For one thing, this is not about him specifically, but I'm approaching it in a very similar way as St. John's, where I'm reading chronologically. But yeah, I mean, the fact that he again, like the first modality that I really dug into was IFS. And in the beginning of the second edition book, he talks about like essentially IFS was born out of a phenomenological observation where he's like, oh, people are already using parts language. So let's just do that, I guess. Um, but and Richard Schwartz, like obviously a very smart guy and is drawing on a lot of therapeutic traditions, but it still feels kind of isolated in time and in its relationship to other disciplines. And Gendlin, insofar as he's a philosophy professor, like I don't even really think of like while focusing is this essential sub process, I also don't think of focusing as really like focusing is the practical clinical application of a vastly bigger body of work that he was doing in his life. I don't really see focusing as that distinct from a lot of other stuff that he was doing, like the way that he was doing philosophy and the way that he was bringing the body into doing philosophy as a like you think as a body. Let's bring that in there. I don't really see it as that all that distinct. I kind of think of focusing as just like having a very attuned conversation. Um, I guess it's philosophical, like whatever. Um, but yeah, like he writes a lot about the philosophical traditions that he comes from and that he didn't come from, and so he talks about like I haven't read it. I want to. Uh, at one point, did like a line by line commentary on De Anima. Um, so he's like deeply rooted in that, and so many of his papers are about Heidegger. Um, talks about the evolution, yeah, of like existentialism and phenomenology, and like sort of where a lot of the other existentialists and phenomenologists ended, and being like, they didn't go far enough. Let's keep going. So he has this view of the evolution of psychology and philosophies that sort of dance around psychology. And so in reading him and reading him chronologically too, it's like he's situated within a civilization's amount of existing thought. Um, so yeah, I think of Genlin as kind of just continuing on uh, what was happening at St. John's.
How did you start doing your money mapping process, and what exactly is that when you help people with that?
Uh, so I mean, you could say very simply that money mapping is a 2 hour focusing session on money and your relationship to it. I do think about it that way. Um, but money mapping was born at the same time as Shift 30 was born because I was doing Shift 30, but it wasn't like about money or marketing. I was like, I want to do something which is about that more specifically. And uh, yeah, money mapping plays off the name of a place that I worked. So like there was sort of a tongue in Shift 30 also does play off the name of another program. So like I've always enjoyed just sort of tongue in cheek references that probably no one's gonna catch most of the time. Uh, but yeah, while I was running, I was like, I mean, I had already for years been using Scapel and mind mapping sh my stuff, helping me explore my own thinking. And yeah, I don't know. It kind of came to me pretty quickly, and then I remember I had been listening to a lot of Visa's videos at the time, and in the 6 months up to that point, I had started what I called the parasocial podcast, where I would just go on walks and I would like play Visa's videos on my phone and then also simultaneously be recording and then just kind of like have a conversation with Visa. And I thought of that very much in like a St. John's reading kind of way, like you're engaging with someone through their work. Um, and I know Visa, like at the time, had his Scapel map, like literally as his Twitter banner. And he was talking about stuff that he was dealing with money and marketing. Uh, and I was like, I want to be like, here's this person who is very much like a figurehead of this whole world that I'm a part of here online. And he's dealing with this stuff. Like, I want to help with that. I want to help work through the blocks and whatever. So I like initially made a money map of one of Visa's videos about not wanting to be a sellout. And then I shared that with him, and then I kind of just like improvised a video where I just explained my journey so far and like why money was a big thing for me. Um, and then yeah, I recorded that. I pinned it to my profile in 2022, and it's been there ever since. And immediately like did a couple of them, but then it wasn't until like 2023 when it really started rolling. And yeah, I started doing them with people that we both know, and people then would tweet about it after, and I was like booked out for like 9 months for a period of like a year or more. So I spent like two, 2+ years doing them like almost every single weekend. Um, it was a lot of fun. Um, but your question being like, what's the process? I don't know. I'm evolving the process. Uh, so we'll see how that evolves, but it's very free form. Um, it's really meant to be an opportunity for someone to sort of have a conversation about money that they've never had. Um, and just like I've spent my whole adult life, like professionally thinking about and working with psychology of money, and then my personal life thinking about that the whole way through as well, and talking to people. So I've kind of like not seen it all. Like obviously there's so much more, but in myself kind of just have seen so much and seen that in others, and I have a very like all I want for people is to have a space where they can explore probably for the first time in many cases for the first time, like explore what do they think about money? Like what is their relationship to it? What did they learn from their parents? Like what do they want? Um, and I'm there to be just sort of a witness to that and um, listen deeply, non-judgmentally, and create a space in which they're free to explore. Um, and I'm mapping it as we go along. So it's sort of almost like I'm doing reflective listening, but I'm also writing it down at the same time. So it becomes not just hearing it back, but you can see it. And then it becomes an artifact that people can refer to. Um, yeah. So I designed that to be a self-contained experience, but it can also be um, the first step into deeper work. Because like I think a lot of people, even people I've done it with and people I know, like don't realize that it doesn't stop there. But yeah, there's like much further, deeper work that I can do with people, do with people. Um, yeah, I'll stop there for now.
We've covered a lot of territory, uh, talking about money mapping and Gendlin and St. John's and marketing. Um, is there anything that you'd like to dive more deeply into or say more about or talk about at this time?
Mhm. I mean, not from myself. I told you that I have a lot of questions and curiosities
Mm-hmm.
about you in general and about you in this moment,
Mm-hmm.
in this transition
Mm-hmm.
time. So, how about can I just like kind of put a number of things maybe
As you
that
like.
um so I'm very curious about Vito Corleone
Mm-hmm.
and how you think about him as a role model or like an aspirational figure. I know that it's not just like all of him. Uh, but that's something I'm very interested in that touches on commerce stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Commerce specifically, like what that means to you. I read your money story. There's so much there already, so it's not like you haven't explored this a lot, but you you have said many times about wanting to um, how do you put it? Like build a feedback loop between generosity and commerce,
Yeah, create
or
mutually
mutually.
supportive
Yeah.
feedback loops between them. Yeah.
So I'm curious, kind of just like open-endedly, yeah, like what commerce means to you. It's something like that's a word that's been coming up more and more for me lately, and I want to give it a new meaning. Um, so that's one. Um, Phaedrus, your the sense that I got was that like the questions you asked in your thesis were like quite together with mine.
Hmm.
Well, I don't know. Um, I know that you've written about and talked about Nicomachean ethics yourself. It
A
seemed
little
like,
bit about his sense of friendship. I've probably written about that somewhere.
yeah. So if that's not as big of a thing as I thought it was, maybe
It's
not.
influenced me a fair bit. I'll just the little bit that I remember of it. Yeah.
Um, yeah, those are the big ones.
Hmm.
I don't want to look at my list.
Hmm.
Just like that. Whatever, yeah, whatever is like most exciting for you.
Hmm. I wish I could write that paper now, the one I wrote about St. John's. I mean, I wish I could write it in that moment with the skills that I have as writing now, and
Mhm.
not even so much skills as a writer, but just as a thinker and as a person. Um, I don't think it's a very good paper. It's like a very effortful paper. I clearly put a lot of work into it. Like I think they gave me, I think they had to give you a grade for it. For anyway, I like got an A on it or whatever. like for your transcript,
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but but it was like more effortful than it was a good paper, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And I think the papers that I wrote just because were a lot better. And um, really, I was trying to learn about self knowledge. And I wish I'd just said that. It's like, hey, I'm interested in the idea of self knowledge, and this dialogue is about it. And I really like Plato, and I kind of trust him to have something worth saying. And I really resonate with Phaedrus as a character. I think I'm very similar to him. And the themes that they talk about writing and sex and memory and rhetoric and stories, like those are all very aligned with my soul. And this adjective they use, poikilos, multicolored, feels very resonant for me. Like it, and it was, as I understand it, it was a kind of a pejorative term. It was associated with
Hmm.
the democratic soul, and I think the idea was that the best was the aristocratic, and then there was oligarchic, I think, and then
Hmm.
maybe another one, and then democratic, and then there's the tyrannical soul, and so
Right.
democratic was like
One
second
of
worst.
both.
um, and you can kind of see that in Phaedrus as a person, and it's not a very flattering portrait of the type of soul that I feel like I am in some ways, and it was humbling to look
Oh,
at that. And um, yeah, I wish I'd just like written a really honest journal entry about that, and why I was interested in self knowledge, and why I trusted Plato, and how I saw Phaedrus and myself and Phaedrus, and what I thought about that, and like reflected that and sat with that. And um, instead, I wrote a really elaborate exposition of like literally one sentence in the whole dialogue,
oh yeah.
which I think was a good sentence, but it was like worth, it wasn't a total waste of time or something, but it's just, I can see now how if I'd just written it differently and kind of been more vulnerable and shared more of myself and why I was
Hmm.
interested, that it would have been a better paper. And that's
Hmm.
tricky because I think they'd kind of beaten that out of us a little bit about St. John's. They were like, no, focus on the text and ask a
Right.
question of the text. But I think I really could have swung in the opposite direction and be like, hey, here's why I care and why I'm choosing this text, or even just
Yeah.
chosen a different text entirely and let the text be secondary to my own curiosity. And there's a really middle way there of not just being like, oh, here's my biography, my life story, never mind what Plato has to say. But I swung too hard in the other direction of like, let me obsessively focus on the text and try to understand what it means without sharing any of why I care or why I picked this text or what resonant for me about it. And maybe I'll write a paper like that one day. I don't. You can. I wrote another paper around the same times about the waves. Have you read the waves?
By
Virginia Woolf. Um,
no.
that one's
I
been a
don't think
big
so.
influence on me as a fiction writer, and I don't think I said anything in that paper about why I cared, but it was a much better paper, and I feel like you can feel why I care, even if it doesn't come through explicitly. Um, but anyway, I'd like to write a
What?
paper like that one day that like is a balance between authentic, vulnerable revealing of care and curiosity with
Hmm.
specific investigation of a specific text that illuminates that curiosity.
Yeah. I've always wanted to like rewrite mine as well.
Uh huh. How would
Uh,
you rewrite yours?
I would probably just record it myself talking. I just the
So
like
real.
your thing about like low effort, not wanting to edit, like that to me applies to writing, where I'm just like
Ah,
writing gets in the way of me thinking.
I see.
Uh, I mean, not that it's unhelpful at all, like, but to just like start thinking about something, just want to open my mouth. That's the best way
Mm.
for me. And it's the way that brings my whole self into it. But what did, can I ask you,
Mm-hmm.
wh- like, because I know how writing is a big, huge part of your life,
Mm-hmm.
like, since before then. Um, what did you mean when you say like it was a better paper? Better in what
Um.
sense?
Well, for one thing, it was much more on the exposition of a text side, but it was really about the whole text and Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. This is a very arrogant thing to say, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the best papers ever written about the waves. Like, it's a little bit poetic, overly poetic, which I can tend to be, and like, but I really just did a very good analysis of the text and kind of described how it works and what she was on about. And I think I really understood Virginia Woolf. And I wouldn't say I understood Plato. Like, I have guesses about Plato, but like, and granted, that's just a whole other animal.
Yeah.
Um, but Virginia Woolf has an incredible depth herself, and I feel like I really got that book, and I explained it very clearly and a little bit poetically, and yeah, you can kind of read between the lines about why I care. That's something I would add more about it now. But if I'd submitted that as my senior essay, like I was really focused on the time on winning an annual essay prize, which I never did. I was like, I really want to win an annual essay prize. Then I'll be one of the cool kids. Uh, and I think that could have won if I'd submitted that one. It was a very strong essay that like really understood the book, and I wrote it after the Phaedrus one, after I'd already handed that one in, so I kind of needed to do one to do the other. But um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like I don't know. I feel like if you read both and had read both books, you'd be like, yeah, this is just objectively a much better paper.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
That okay, that kind of points at what I was thinking about was like the paper as like final product that is read by others and paper as like a thing that you did to express yourself.
This is
'Cause
actually something I
yeah,
discovered recently in my own writing that I've been really interested in. Is like I think a first draft is for yourself.
yeah,
When you write something, it's for yourself, and just to clarify your own thinking. And you can use shorthand that makes sense to you and write it in an order that makes sense to you. And but then revision and publication is about, I would describe as theory of mind for the reader, where you're like, okay, if I put myself in the shoes of someone who's never thought about this, hasn't read this,
right,
like what do they need to know, in what order, how can I explain this so that it makes sense to them? And
right.
um, yeah.
I mean, that was, yeah, like now that you brought it back to that, I was like, oh, yeah, well, like, that was literally my whole job as a copywriter.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like to take into extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's interesting. I was, because like I said, I listened to you and Rival. Rival was talking about like how he was using Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
very much not caring about the actual artifacts that came out, but
That's right.
writing, just
Just the
facilitating
process.
facilitating what's happening for him. Uh, I tend to think more that way. Um, but yeah, I've always like I think about the artistic process from like having life and having experience and like trying to express that in some way, and then the movement from that to finally like making it into a piece that whether it's writing or a song and then performing it. And like I've never quite like I get up to the point where like I have the experience, I process the experience, I use writing, I use music, whatever. When you get to the point where then the effort becomes like, let me shape this up and make it something for others, I'm just like, I don't care anymore. Like that doesn't seem like worth the time. Uh, I don't think that that's just like the final answer by any means. I think I just haven't like it hasn't clicked for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because obviously
Well,
I know that sharing is that's something that's on Twitter so much is about the power. I mean, that's what kind of what Rival was saying, even like exposing things that you didn't know, you're not certain how it's going to be received, and having that be received really well, and bringing things to light in that way, like that, I totally recognize. But
mm-hmm.
yeah, the work involved to get something to that point, I'm just like, it seems like a lot of fluff or something. I don't know. It doesn't seem meaty and meaningful to me in the way that other parts of it are.
Well, I think different pieces of writing have different purposes, and if the purpose is just to like write a journal entry or to take notes on your thinking, then that's perfectly reasonable. But I'm writing a novel right now. I want to always be writing a novel, and I really love this story and what I'm writing, and it's really good. It's so good, and it's so early in the process still. I've been working on it for a year now, and but it still feels very early. Like it easily feels like it could take. I hope it doesn't take this long, but it could take 10 years or several
Mm.
decades or something. And I'd love to finish a first draft this year if I could, but it's clearly not something that's going to finish overnight. And when I put that much care into something, I really want to ship it out in a way that reflects that I put that much time and effort into it. And um, I don't know, when I read other people's stories, I can kind of tell where there are rough edges or things that they didn't think through, and that's just part of the process too. But if I'm like, I also just recently made a notes blog,
Mm.
notes.tasshin.com,
Right. I read
and
some of those.
like literally I'm not spending more than that. Probably the longest I spent on one of those was like 45 minutes. Maybe there's one I spent like an hour and a half on because I edited it from a journal entry. But point is, like, those are not, most of them are taking 10-15 minutes, and it's
Mm.
like very low degree of effort. And whereas, some of the blog posts I've written, one of them literally took 3 years to write, the fundraising one. And that wasn't continuous work. There were long stretches of I don't know what to do with this thing, but um, I think those are kind of higher effort. And I imagine that if it sounds like you found writing and specifically speaking to be something that's just part of your process and helps you think through things. And it makes sense to me that you wouldn't want to, like, yeah, you're like, I'm done. I already got the thing I wanted out of this. But I imagine if there was a piece of writing that you wrote that you were like, no, this is like something I really want people to understand and care about, and that's going to serve the world in some way, and whatever your own language or whatever that you would want to edit, and it would feel
Yeah.
inspired to be like, oh yeah, I want to revise that.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of just the things that I've seen on your blog over the years, like the fundraising one, or like how to be on Twitter, friendship, keeping up correspondences, all sorts of things. Like the thing that you created is not a thing that I ever even like think about creating, in that like you've had all these experiences about this topic, you've learned from others, figure out what works, and now you're making this thing available to others to learn from.
I'm reminded
And
of what you
the
said
intro,
about.
yeah,
No, please, please.
I don't know, it speaks to like I mean, because writing, whether it's a journal or otherwise, like is relational, and the fact that these posts are what they are for you, like it speaks to a certain relationship that you have with people, or the way you're even conceiving of your relationship with people, that you would bring all this stuff together that you've gone through and then put it out for them like that.
As you say that, I'm reminded of what you said about what you learned from St. John's, which I quite liked about, oh, like nothing is separate, and there's no need to artificially separate, like this is this and this is that. And I think my blog is very much that, and my work, it's like, yeah, I could put things into categories. I know how I would categorize it, but it's really just like, yeah, this is the stuff I'm on about. And it does, I know how they fit together into a larger whole, which is my life, as opposed to, you know, artificially cutting up and like, oh, this is this part of my life, this is this part. And I like living that way better than, oh, I am this type of a person that I'm going to
Right,
convey to you that I am a good of that type of person. I don't
right.
know. That's just not me. I'm Tasshin.
Just, I mean,
Nice to
that's
meet you.
just putting yourself into a conceptual box.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very much antithetical to like all of my values to do that. So
Mm. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm.
I really admired that about you, that you like just show every side of yourself. I mean, I know I know you, there are things that you don't share, but like you do far more than many others show such a wide spectrum of yourself.
Yeah, I try to have discretion about like the specifics of what I share, but I try to share all of myself in my heart. And like I don't talk about my family or specific stuff that involves other people or whatever. It's like that's not mine to share really. But
Right.
um, I'm also reminded of you asking about Vito Corleone because like
Mm.
for me, it makes perfect sense that I would be inspired. Like we all have so many heroes and so many people inspire us, and everyone who comes on my podcast, for example, is someone that inspires me, and they don't all fit together in some neat way. And um, to me, it makes perfect sense that I could be inspired by a fictional character who's a mob boss, and like, well, why
Yeah.
not? Like, that doesn't have to be in conflict with Resident Evil
Yeah, I
3
mean,
or Peace
I'm not
Pilgrim.
asking why.
No, yeah,
Of
no,
course.
yeah, yeah. No, I
I'm
just like
curious
that.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What would you be curious about?
Um,
You recently rewatched the movies, right? Am I
yeah,
recalling
yeah.
that?
Well, I visited Italy in September for the
Mm.
first time. I spent 3 weeks there, and I spent a lot of time in Rome. And then when I came back, I finally watched the whole Godfather series for the first time,
Ah,
and then
okay,
I
okay.
rewatched it
Uh
a
huh.
couple weeks ago.
I see.
Once I realized that that was uh, up here for you. I was like, I want to like be acquainted with that more, and I mean, I've also been reading since I came back. Basically, I've had two tracks: reading Gendlin
Mm-hmm.
and reading books about the history of Rome.
Mm.
So Godfather fit perfectly well into that.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like going out of my way, really. Like,
Mm.
uh, yeah, what does the Tasshin shaped Vito Corleone look like?
Well, give me a few years and it'll be really obvious. But um, I think the last 4 or 5 years I was presenting as this kind of like love and light hippie type person that's like, hey, may you be happy, and I'm sending you love. And that's like,
Yeah.
I'm really glad that I had that period and I've cultivated those virtues, and I still want to embody that. I'm not like letting go of that or abandoning that. That's still me, but really that's been a source of power for me to like know that I am standing for goodness and truth and love and kindness, and that I want to be of service from there, and that encounters power. And of course I was interested in military strategy and
Like
productivity for
that's one of those like amazing like things where it's like, wait, what? But
yeah,
yeah,
because
you
there's
can
a lot
have
of
all of
people
that.
that have really good wishes for the world and are just kind of incompetent.
Yeah.
And I think it behooved me to be like, no, I actually want to have an impact in the world. So let me study how people have done that and learn what I can very practically. I wasn't, I was really not doing like an academic study for the sake of understanding ideas. It was like which tools will help me to do the good things, and I'm willing to learn ideas and theory and history in service of that. But it was like, no, I need to run a nonprofit. Like, how do I do that? And
Yeah.
um, the Service Guild really uses a lot of those ideas. So I think Vito Corleone embodies a lot of that in the way he holds power, where, uh, just imagine you're like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid, and your dad dies, and your mom dies, and your older brother dies, and
In the
somebody
way
like,
that they do.
what's that?
In the way that it happened,
Exactly.
no less. Yeah.
I think it would be so cool to watch. Um, the machete ed order of Star Wars. I've never actually watched it in this order, but there are people who like have reordered the prequels, so it's like a specific way of watching them
Mm.
with the old movies, so that it's like the plot hits more deeply.
Huh.
And I think it would be really cool to do an edit of like basically a chronological edit of The Godfather that started with the sections in two where it's just Vito Corleone as a kid, and it's like the Vito
Mm.
Corleone arc,
Just like
and then
very chronological. Yeah.
exactly, and then you get to the beginning of The Godfather one,
Mm.
and then Godfather two with Michael. That would just be. I have to watch that sometime, but yeah, if you put yourself in that shoes and you go to America and you're a little boy and you've been shepherded away from a dangerous world of Italy, and then but now you're in America and you don't speak English and you're for some reason not really speaking to anyone. Uh, you're like kind of a mute for some reason, and nobody thinks very highly of you. You're skinny and small, and um, somehow in that environment, in a world where like Italians were very oppressed in this, both in this world and the fictional world, like
Hmm.
he used what levers he had available to care for his family and his friends and to be loyal to the people who were loyal to him and help them where he could. And, his goal was never like murder people or take advantage of people, or it was like he used what little levers he had available in limited environment to help the people he cared about, including his family and his friends,
Hmm.
his business colleagues, and he treated people really well. And
Hmm.
I think he both showed, I think he showed people what loyalty means and embodied that, and then expected that of people and earned that from people. And mm, part of how he earned respect, I was thinking about this, part of why I think everyone in his world respects him is because he has murdered people, and he knows, everyone knows that.
Hmm.
I don't plan to murder, I don't plan to steal, I don't want to encourage gambling or prostitution, but
Hmm.
I can admire the way that he did business and the way that he cared for his family and the way that he used what means he had available in accordance with virtues that I really respect. And I think that that has been a powerful example for me. That's a good counterpart to someone
Peace
like Peace
Pilgrim.
Pilgrim or the Buddha.
Hmm.
Peace Pilgrim actually thought very strategically, as did the Buddha, I
Right.
think,
You
in their
mentioned.
own way. But um, I think Vito Corleone just really embodies that in a way that's inspiring for me at this time. I want to move to New York. I want to like
Right.
build a web of relationships that can actually move the world in a certain way. Of late, I've
Yeah.
been really standing for world peace, and a lot of people have given up on that idea and think it's naive, and I just don't think so. And
Mhm.
so I want to put myself in a position where the Service Guild can have an enormous impact, and it's actually possible to have world peace in 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I don't know how long it'll take, but I would guess not tomorrow. So, yeah.
That okay. I think there's so much in the veto thing. It's clearly so big for you,
Mm-hmm.
and I find it really interesting and compelling. I want to stay on there, but it reminds me of another theme of question, which is about time
Mm-hmm.
and your relationship to time and thinking in the long term
Mm-hmm.
scales. It seems like you think very far ahead. Um, And obviously, I think obviously like that's part of veto, like in as much as that family was
Yeah, they
building
think
an
in multiple
empire.
generations there.
Yeah.
I don't
But
think I'm great at this yet, but I've sort of picked things that I want to stand for, and it's like Visa says, like playing long games. I don't know. It's like I've kind of picked which long games I want to play and who I want to play them with, and the play style I want to play
yeah,
with, and then it's just a matter of playing that way.
yeah. Well, that immediately reminded me of like because I listened to both interviews with Mary
Mm-hmm.
and this the more new one first.
Mm-hmm.
That was you guys were like talking about like after one conversation be like, yeah, we're gonna work together for like 40 years
We're
or
about to
whatever.
hit our
Uh,
fourth year any day now. It'll be April
That's
5th.
a
So.
that's a long time
Mm-hmm.
already.
Mm-hmm.
But like just the fact that you mutually were thinking in that time frame already,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's
I
not
mean, we're
just like, oh,
gonna
you're cool, like let's do stuff. It's like, let's
no, let's really do stuff. I mean, we're gonna live such and such number of years. I hope to live 80, 90, 100, 120 years, maybe. Who knows? I mean, there's all kinds of changes happening, um,
Yeah.
and I want to make the most of that and live a long time. And from that perspective, like I'll be 35 this year. Like that's still a third of my life. Like that means I still have hopefully 2/3, 3/4 of my life to go.
Yeah.
And if you're really thoughtful about that, it's not so much like having 10 moves planned in advance as like knowing what kind of person you want to be and what games you want to play and putting your time and energy into those games rather than the other games. Like I just save a lot of time. But like, for example, when I go to a city, I almost never do any tourist stuff. I'm just so not interested in that. I want to see people. Like if I was where you are, I would go and look you up. I'd be like, hey, I want to go see Daemonic. Like, let's go hang out. We've talked corresponded for years, but I wouldn't be interested in the tourist attractions of your city or like
Yeah.
doing things. You know, if you were like trying to take me to things, I'd be like, well, that's fine, but only if we're hanging out.
Yeah, no, I'm entirely with you. In Italy, like my parents are this way.
Mm-hmm,
The way they travel is they go to a city and then they just spend like the entire day walking, like with
mm-hmm,
no agenda. And so
mm-hmm,
like my mom and I in Italy literally
mm-hmm,
walked like on average 12 hours a day for
mm-hmm.
3 weeks, just like exploring whatever street seemed cool to go down next.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah,
There's a lot of
I
power
would,
that comes
that's what
from
I would
that.
want to do if you were here as well. Not touristy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of power in that, knowing who you are and how you want to play and what games you're playing and what games you're not playing in. So I don't think I have like I have some of the moves. I know I'm going to do this and I know some of where I'm going to, but it's not like some elaborate thing. It's more just like, yeah, this is what I'm doing and I'm going to do that. You
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Um, yeah, with time, I've like going back to that Meisner thing about
Hmm.
living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. I've been playing around more and more with just using that in life,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, well, since it's not about being artificial, all you have to do is just like use your imagination and then let yourself live in that. And so thinking like long term, for example, and like imagining another, a bigger future or whatever, like your vision is.
Mm-hmm.
Like it does, you don't have to hold that as like this thing I must do, but it creates a container in which you live.
Mm-hmm.
I had an experience towards the end of last year, I think, where I had a I had a scare where I thought I had found like a lump, like a cancerous lump on me. So for a week, like before I got to the doctor, I was like pretty anxious and like kind of going into a bit of a spiral. But at one point during that week, I was sitting down recording, thinking about what I want this practice that I'm building to be and what I want to do and what do I imagine it over many years. And when I like tapped into that and like because it wasn't an arbitrary thing, it was like this is like I'm trying to find the thing that really is it. Like what in the focusing way, like which thing actually resonates, which is actually an expression of me. When I was like focused on that, suddenly the cancer scare possibility became so small. I was like, yeah, okay, like if it is the case, like I'll deal with that because there's so much more that I'm here to do and what I want to do. And I was like, wow, okay, yeah, when you expand sort of I think about it in terms of capacity, like in the trauma nervous system stuff, at least what I've spent time with. It's not about like actively making your nervous system regulate. It's about learning to have greater and greater somatic capacity and nervous system capacity because when you do that, things just begin to bubble up and resolve themselves. So I think about that sense of capacity, but I like how along what other dimensions can you give yourself that capacity? So time obviously being one of them. It's like if instead of thinking in terms of like I live in this sort of like 12-month bubble, what if I am thinking 25 years ahead and also like thinking backwards 25 years or whatever, like thinking in my backwards in my life. So I'm like, oh yeah, here I am within this huge container of time. And it really sort of recontextualizes so much, gives you space. So yeah, that's something I've been playing with, like using time, long-term time as like creating a creating a living space for yourself almost in the moment. But anyway, yeah. I had
Um,
a, mm,
I unfortunately have a call in
okay,
a few minutes, so we should probably, or 15 minutes or so, so I
okay.
should probably wrap up. Is there anything you'd like to say to close out?
Mm, mm. Yeah. I really appreciated this time to go so at length with my own story and interests and whatnot, but also to like connect with you in a way that we haven't yet really done. And I would say on my side, like this feels like only a kind of beginning of questions that I'm so curious about with you and in engagement. Um, I know, yeah, like people say it a lot on Twitter. I saw some people say it like yesterday, just Tasshin being such a hero figure. And I feel that. Um, and learning more about what you're doing with the Service Guild, I think it's really cool. And I want to go. Hearing you and Mary talk about how you work with people and the focus on service and that fun is service and the helping people see what you would probably call like a vow in themselves. Like that is so rich and compelling. And I haven't yet, but I want to go. And I don't know if it's like booking a call or something, but I want to talk to you guys
Hmm.
more. So, because I want to lean more into that and money, like I said, with the money mapping, it kind of started with seeing Visa talking about things that he was dealing with. And I've been monitoring this, across Teapot. Like money really seems to be this thing that it's kind of like a last frontier in many ways, for people. And like I've been, this is like what I've been doing my whole life in
Mm-hmm.
many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say that I'm here and like I'm doing this work because I want to like support you and Visa and all of everyone that we know and care about and who are doing cool things or don't know what they want to do, but we know that they can do cool things. Like I want to be supporting that. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm grateful for your time and sharing how your life has gone and what you've learned and um, the reflections that we came across. And for me, this podcast is in a lot of ways one of my schools or one of my learning containers. And um, it strikes me that, yeah, I think I really learned a lot in this conversation. That would be hard for me to. I'd go, I'd stammer. I'd be like, it's not quite that, you know. But give me a little while, and I'd be able to. Yeah, I'm thinking it's especially embodied stuff, but I'm learning so much about the world, and this is a place that I can learn about people and their ideas and how they're living, and I feel like I learned a lot in this conversation. So I'm grateful for that, and grateful for your time, and
Mm.
grateful to have an ally in you. Um, hmm. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Thank you. Also, oh, another thing. I feel like in my life now, I'm like finally like ready for meta.
Mm.
So,
Oh
so
no.
that's also a thing that I want to engage with you further on. And I've had in my head for a while a very, very baby idea about something bringing money and meta
Hmm.
together.
Hmm.
So perhaps there's something to talk about there. But if not, I will do meta on money myself.
Love for my brother, Daemonic. Hmm. Hmm.